passed? Who's got an A+ grade? And what about the big fat fails? After an astonishing year for the British royal family, I'm joined by Brittany, editor of the Royal News Network, who is going to unveil her brutally honest report cards for 2025. And let's start off your way, Brittany. Actually, do you know what we'll do? Let's start from the worst to the best, because we'll start grumpy and we'll end positive. Okay. And of course, the worst, the big fat fails, are closer your way. Scoring an F grade in 2025 is Prince Harry. Brittany, why? What has he done to annoy the teacher here?
Oh, man, so much, Dan, especially from an American perspective. I find Prince Harry and his inability to, I think, understand this country quite obnoxious and like want to speak on behalf of this country. Very, very obnoxious. But Harry, of course, this year, what we've seen from him is really a change to kind of shifting into a role of trying to be like a cosplay royal, like really, really trying this time. He's given up pretty much seemingly having any role in Hollywood, and he's basically going around and speaking on behalf of different events and just grabbing bags of cash, like going to Canada for a real estate conference. Like he knows nothing about real estate, especially in Canada. He doesn't live there. Why is he speaking? Well, somebody's going to pay him to do that. And obviously we've seen that towards the end of this year, and we saw him go to Ukraine. We've seen him really trying to insert himself into this place as a world mover and shaker. And he's very much following along the tracks of his wife, who sort of started this years and years ago before she met Harry by pouring a bunch of money into PR to promote her for things, let's say, that she didn't fully accomplish. And Harry's very much following the same track. It's sort of annoying to see from a royalist perspective. And he's just going to constantly try this again and again and again. He's just such a waste of money. And when you think of this security case, especially, although when he's getting this review for the risk assessment, hopefully it'll just come back as nothing. But I could see him at some point, let's say, asking for the American taxpayers, because he wants his IPP status back, I'm sure, asking and trying to get some of my taxpayer dollars to fund his security. So I just find him totally obnoxious this year, as he is pretty much every year. And he just needs to get a real job. Buck up, buddy. Get a real job.
Oh, 100%. I mean, Brittany, this is the huge risk, isn't it, though? Because the events are becoming more desperate. The speeches are becoming more hackneyed. He's not revealing anything. He looks miserable. He looks old. He's so desperately unhappy. But the problem for the British royal family, Brittany, and why I think he fully deserves this F grade, is that desperation is going to lead to risks. And those are the types of risks that saw Andrew Mountbatten Windsor form a completely dodgy relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, that saw Sarah Ferguson, the former Duchess of York, beg Epstein to provide her tens of thousands of dollars. And at some point, do we risk Harry getting to that point too?
I mean, you have to address this now. Andrew is a warning of what Harry will become in just, 10, 20 years. He's already going around and grabbing bags of cash from things that he's not associated with. And in the particular case of Canada, you almost feel like Harry is trying to wiggle his way back into the good graces of the UK by appealing to Canada and like becoming, he thinks he's a folk hero in Ukraine, like just absolutely crazy things. The guy, when he talks and you listen to him, he sounds completely deluded, completely disconnected from reality. I think it was this year that he had, that long temper tantrum on the BBC, calling his security case, the outcome of it, a stitch-up job, like not understanding that when you leave a job, like being a royal, you don't get to take the perks with you. But Harry, I think, is a huge liability for the royal family. I think he will get into a relationship with somebody dodgy if he hasn't already. I mean, you could see him sort of wiggling his way in and trying to flirt with the Kardashians at Kris Jenner's recent party. So Harry's definitely a huge, huge liability here, and one that if they don't address, he is going to come back and bite the royals at some point. So it's time to take the titles, time to take the place in the line of succession. Harry's made his decisions and he's got to live with them.
Also getting a big fat fail on Britney's brutal report card. Meghan Markle, an F grade. What's she done to deserve that, Britney?
Oh my gosh, if I could give her like an F minus minus, I would. Like the whole thing with like American Riviera Orchard becoming as ever, and the whole train wreck of her business. I mean, that has been fascinating to see. I've like been shocked by how bad it is. Like just pure awfulness of her brand is truly astounding. How badly it's managed and run, the product launches, everything totally bad. Obviously, this year was her big relaunch back into Instagram, and we've seen so many more failures than successes on there. And she's constantly like, she used to sign off, I think, all her posts on her regular Instagram with as ever Meghan. Of course, she stopped doing that. So we've seen wild inconsistencies this year and how like there's just no concrete brand strategy for her at all. I think everything changes on the whims of the day, which is not how you should run a business at all. And of course, we had the Harper's Bazaar photo shoot. That was simply bizarre. We have Meghan Markle, going to Paris Fashion Week in an outfit I can only describe as something a woman from Boca Raton would wear who was in her 70s. It was horrible. And obviously, you had the connection with Balenciaga as well, which was a fashion brand that has been under fire for recent years for some really distasteful and exploitative photo ads and all these sorts of things. And so it's been an absolute train wreck for Meghan, not to mention the fact that her show has flopped majorly. We had the I'm Meghan Sussex tantrum, but then we're not using Sussex. Like this has been a wild year for Meghan, but overall, massive failure. I think this whole year could be summed up as a rise and fall of Meghan Markle. She had sort of a peak when the first season launched, the first brand launch came out, and then it's been cratering ever since. And every interview she does, she reveals, I think, the lack of depth that she has as a person. She's not as intellectual or as interesting as she seems to think she is. And she's really stuck on things she's achieved as a child, which tells you she has really no accomplishments to her name as an adult because it's still about the dish soap commercial. And now it's about the brownies that she did, I think, for 1 year. So this has just been a disastrous year for Meghan. Like, in orders of magnitude, it's hard to describe.
It really is. It really is. I mean, my God, I've got whiplash just thinking about
all over the place.
Of her various U-turns. I mean, Britney, it's astonishing to think this year she stole a podcast from some young woman, how to be a female founder. Then it was such a disaster, such a flop. It's almost just been erased from her history, never to be spoken about again. I think totally 2025 was crisis stations. The PR is impossible now because the strategy is so all over the place. But look, let's move on. He's no longer a prince, Britney. What have you given Andrew Mountbatten Windsor on his report card?
Right from the opening seconds, this segment makes one thing crystal clear. This is not a polite royal review, it's a reckoning. The framing of report cards immediately strips away deference. Royals aren't being admired, they're being graded, judged like employees who've failed performance reviews. And starting from worst to best is deliberate. It signals that failure dominates the modern monarchy's headlines, not success. This is a warning shot to the institution itself, adapt or rot. Prince Harry, the F-grade liability. Harry receiving an F-grade isn't controversial, it's inevitable based on the evidence laid out. The core accusation here is devastating. Harry no longer represents anything real, his cosplaying royalty for cash. From paid speeches he's unqualified for, global virtue signaling tours, speaking on behalf of countries he doesn't understand, monetizing titles he claims to reject. This segment exposes Harry as a man without a lane, drifting between faux statesman, activist for hire, and grievance merchant. The most dangerous point raised isn't embarrassment, it's risk. The comparison to Andrew and Epstein-era behavior is chilling. Cash desperation. Questionable associations. Status without structure. This isn't just about Harry looking ridiculous, it's about him becoming a future scandal waiting to explode. Meghan Markle, brand collapse in real time. Meghan's F grade is framed not as spite, but as business failure. This segment dismantles the myth of Meghan as a savvy entrepreneur. Constant rebrands. No coherent strategy. Public U-turns. Identity confusion, Sussex vs not Sussex. PR without substance. The key takeaway. Meghan doesn't have a brand, she has moods. Every launch feels reactive, not strategic. Every interview exposes shallowness rather than vision. The commentary lands hardest on this truth: a woman selling empowerment while unable to demonstrate adult achievement. That's lethal in the influencer economy. Authenticity always wins eventually. Prince Andrew, quiet exile beats loud narcissism. Andrew's D-grade isn't forgiveness, it's acknowledgement of one thing only. He shut up. That's the brutal irony. Andrew, disgraced and exiled, causes less damage than Harry and Meghan because he's not constantly chasing relevance. This segment reinforces a painful institutional truth: silence can be more responsible than activism.
A D. And that is sort of, let's say, just acknowledging the fact that he sort of gave up the ghost and let go of his title without much of a fuss. And that's the only reason he got the D. Otherwise, he should get the F. But to be fair to Andrew, the sort of the reason I think in some ways he doesn't get as much flack as Harry and Meghan do is that, yes, he is in exile, but he's remained pretty quiet. He's not constantly trying to poke his head into things. I mean, he's subtly trying. You know, he was at the funeral trying to subtly place himself or what have you, but it's not to the level of near obnoxiousness as Harry and Meghan. But obviously, with his dealings with Epstein, with his lying about how long he was in contact with him, these sorts of things, all this comes back very, very negatively on the monarchy. And to be fair to him, he's sort of taken his lumps and he sort of kind of wittered away. And you can't ask for much more than that. If there's a book coming in the offing, hopefully that's not the case. That would be the only time where it would change maybe to an F. But at this point, he's moving. He's accepted the loss of his title. He's moving. He's attempting to sort of kind of go into obscurity. And that's all you can really ask for in this particular situation.
Okay, what about his estranged wife, Sarah Ferguson, formerly known as the Duchess of York?
Yeah, I gave her a D as well. Maybe I should have ranked her a bit higher, but obviously
no, she doesn't deserve a higher ranking. Seriously,
she's not quite as bad as some of the others, but definitely she obviously had connections with Jeffrey Epstein longer than she publicly stated, and she's as bad as Andrew. Like, they have been going around, especially her going around grabbing bags of cash from people who are questionable for years and years at this point. And so it's just one of those things where they kind of got what was coming to them, but it was such bad behavior over the years. She had really been trying to rehab her image, so I do give her props for that. But obviously the weight of so many poor decisions over the years had to culminate in something, and this was it. And she's lost book deals and all these sorts of things. And in some ways it's deserved, especially because she doesn't have the greatest track record with supporting various causes and these sorts of things. So at this point, Sarah obviously is licking her wounds. And so hopefully she figures out something else to do, you could say, with her life. But that is Sarah at this point. So she gets a D for the year. Not as bad as some, but not all that great either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a forgiving person in a lot of ways, and I don't really believe in cancellation or cancel culture. But the problem is, Brittany, Fergie has been given so many chances, time and again. She has been welcomed back in. And each time, rather than actually do something good, become a positive force, there's more dodgy relations. And I guess the emails that were just so damning were her begging Epstein for money, firstly, which is so unbecoming because, of course, at that point, she knew he was a paedophile. He'd gone to jail. And then desperately apologizing to him after she had gone public to withdraw support for him and to say, oh, I'll never be in touch with him again. Our relationship is finished. And I thought, this is someone who you cannot trust, because I don't mind if someone wants to stand by a human being. There's lots of reasons to do so. I mean, let's just look at my personal context, right? I've stood by two criminals over the course of the past year, Tommy Robinson and Lucy Connolly. Both, I believe, were political prisoners in the United Kingdom. And in the past, you can look at lots of people who've been locked up, including Nelson Mandela, who people have chosen to support. But the problem with Fergie is that she only wanted to continue a relationship with Epstein for financial reasons. There was nothing altruistic about it. And she wasn't honest about it. She lied to the public while doing something altogether different behind the scenes. And it's that sort of hypocrisy which I find unforgivable.
It is. And that's something definitely Fergie is dealing with now. And she should have figured out how to make money without having to go to all these unscrupulous people, because you're so right, Dan. Fergie has had numerous opportunities at this point to turn things around, and she has had this issue for years and years at this point, which is overspending. She overspends to an absurd degree and cannot recoup the costs and these sorts of things. And it's getting to the point where she can't sort of handle it anymore, and she's constantly having to go around to more unscrupulous people to try to make money. And when she could have just figured out how to live within her means, obviously she's made a decent amount of money, but she's lost, I think, a lot of this money too in unbalanced spending. And so at this point, Sarah, she was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. I think if I remember right, she maybe even introduced Andrew and Epstein, and she really did lie about her connections to him in order to save herself. And that's sort of at this point, sort of unforgivable. They had to have known more would come out, and they just kept trying to dodge it, and it came back to bite them for sure.
Next on the list, middle of the pack with a C+ rating, is King Charles, Brit.
That was a hard one because I was trying to decide what to do. And King Charles,
tough, but I think fair, to be honest.
It's hard because Charles allowed the Andrew situation. Andrew is something he should have dealt with almost immediately when he became king. He should have seen the writing on the wall, tried to figure this out. And really, the C+, why the grade is, I think, brought down so much is how the Andrew situation was handled in these last couple of months. It's, oh, he won't use the title. And then 2 weeks later, oh, we're stripping everything. And it's like, okay, so you got there because you didn't deal with the problem in the first place. You tried to do the least, let's say, damaging option to your brother, just kind of let it linger. And then, oh, you have to almost overreact to correct it. And it's just something where if, again, this had been dealt with, I would argue more proactively rather than reactively, because I feel like the monarchy right now is very reactive, where they should be more proactive, sort of trying to mitigate situations to the extent where they don't come something where you have to react really harshly to sort of try to get the narrative back where you want it. So that's part of it. The other half is Harry, obviously. Harry is a problem that has to be dealt with. He will become Andrew or worse. And I mean, he's already worse in some ways because him and Meghan are very much monetizing their titles for their own personal gain, which is not what they're supposed to do. And if Charles lets this go on, it's dragging down the monarchy overall. It's dragging down him. It's dragging down the family. And so he has to address this. He really, really does. And he can't just allow it to linger on forever because he wants to protect this institution. I think in some ways, the monarchy overall, the British monarchy has been slow to sort of modernize, slower than you would think. And I think this is just the time where they need to take an accurate assessment of where things are at. You know, you have the peppercorn rent issues now. There were some questions about the Duchy of Cornwall and Lancaster. So Charles needs to, I think, it's not just his grandmother, or sorry, his mother anymore. I think in some ways they're still complacent because Queen Elizabeth was so powerful and so beloved, but this new generation, not quite so much. So you almost have to be more proactive, more strategic in your thinking. And I just don't think the monarchy is there. And Charles, as the head of it, I think he needs to be better and more concise at this point in figuring out how to navigate things. Otherwise, I don't know if the monarchy will be here in the next couple of decades.
Okay, Brittany next has given Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, a B grade. I mean, He's had a quiet year, Brittany, hasn't he?
He has. And I
Come
kind
on,
of give it
Edward.
that.
We need you.
Yes, and that's why I gave him the B, because it's like, okay, he's done his work. He hasn't caused a scandal or anything, but you never hear about any of it. And he lacks a complete presence. And some of that I think is on the monarchy itself, the institution. He is one of your least problematic members. How can you raise the profile perhaps of Edward? And yes, he's not super exciting or flashy, and that's totally fine. The monarchy is not really built for flash and like in some aspects of glamour and these sorts of things, and more like Hollywood style. Edward is, I think, a great example of a strong working royal, but he needs something to do that I think brings him a bit more, let's say, attention or something, just so that he has, let's say, a strong presence in the world. Because like people forget Edward exists a lot of the times. They just do. So it's like, how can the monarchy better help? I think Edward, I think, had the better presence that he should have publicly. I think if they could do that, I think that would be a great benefit to them, figuring out where that role is. Obviously, he's head of the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, and I think that's fantastic. But there has to be something else here. How to use him and Sophie more strategically to bolster the monarchy, especially as the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester are probably going to retire in a couple of years. The Duke of Kent is basically retired. Alexander of Kent is basically retired. And so, how do you raise a profile of Edward? I think is something that the monarchy should consider, because he's a strong working royal and he doesn't really have a lot of scandals in his wake in the last couple of decades. So, I think that's a very strong indicator of somebody who is a good benefit and asset to the monarchy.
Indeed. And I mean, lovely family, great children.
Mm-hmm.
We saw those pictures a couple of weeks ago of Lady Louise just on the ground in the train. And you sort of think, gosh, that is the type of princess you want, rather than, shall I say it, Beatrice and Eugenie, who at times are quite entitled, a bit like their father. But okay, let's move on. Scoring a solid B grade is Queen Camilla. Brittany, over to you.
Yes. So Queen Camilla, she has done a lot. I love her work with, obviously, victims of sexual violence. That's been something that she's been quite passionate about. There's going to be an interview that debuts, I think, I want to say it's in the new year, with the family who has been impacted by the man who was stalking one of their daughters, had been a former dating, and had killed the mother and two of the girls. And so I think she does quite a bit of work, and it's really good work. It's just going to be figuring out, I think, how to, let's say, I mean, it's going to be so hard because of the legacy and the impact of Diana. Camilla just can't quite reach those heights. And so I think Camilla, she's such a great asset to the monarchy. I almost should have ranked her more like a B plus or something. But also, if she could figure out how to help Charles navigate this Harry situation and Andrew, I think that would be more beneficial. But she just doesn't have, let's say, as strong a presence in some ways as she should have as queen. But she kind of lacks, let's say, some of the glamour and charisma of some of the other royal ladies. She's a bit older as well, but I think Camilla has done a lot of great work. But I look forward to, let's say, more, and let's say being able to, I think, navigate the role of queen a little bit more. We did see a tiara surprise this year.
Yeah, it was a quieter year compared to last year, where I think she did step up to the plate in 2024 when there was the absence of Charles and Catherine. But okay, let's move on to your superstars now, your royal superstars, because Brittany's tough, but scoring a very impressive A grade is Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. So what her husband lacks, Brittany, in charisma and visibility, Sophie makes up for.
Sophie does. Sophie has had a lot of, I think, high-profile trips this year. She went to the Congo. She went to South and Central America. And I want to say she went to somewhere else as well. I'm sort of forgetting some of those. But she has done a lot of work of women who have been victims of violence and war. She went to Ukraine this year. The first member of the British royal family to go to Ukraine was Sophie. And so Sophie has done a lot of great work, and I think a lot of good high profile work. It's hopeful to see them utilize her a bit more. I think would be great, her with Edward, because I think she brings us some of the star power that Edward lacks. And so Sophie has been a fantastic asset to the monarchy, a great working royal. And so I think for the solid year of work this year and the impressive trips she's been able to have, because she was in South and Central America for like over a week. So she has done a lot of great work. It doesn't get as much of attention as the rest of the royals, but I think it's really solid. And what I want, I think, from the royal family as well, just speaking about Edward and Sophie, is how do they better themselves publicize what the two of them are doing? Because I don't think they publicize it well. I don't think the royal family website is run well. And so if they can figure out how to, I think, promote the work of these other more minor royals more, I think the better off they'll be, because then they can see all the great work they're doing. And I think Sophie, though, knocked it out of the park this year. She had a lot of really impressive engagements and got to represent the monarchy quite a bit.
Yeah, and she's very well loved. Also securing a very impressive A grade, Prince William. Over to you, Brittany.
Yeah, so William has had a good year this year. He has, I think, really sort of established himself as what it's going to look at like for him as king. And while I do still have again some reservations, because he doesn't like history, and that's a personal big passion of mine. He is really, I think, trying to establish the Duchy of Cornwall. I think he's doing a lot of things behind the scenes. So I'm hoping next year we see a bit more of him in front of the scenes, because it's so much harder to report on all the things going on behind the scenes. But he's had a very, very solid year this year. I'm really hoping next year we'll have some sort of tour from Catherine and William together. I think that would be fantastic. And so he's had a very strong year this year, really stepping up. And yes, he's sort of preparing for the future, but it's understandable that he's doing so as well. And hoping that him and his father can sort of figure out how to manage the future and the past colliding a bit between the two of them, I think is going to be the challenge. But he's had a great year.
And Brittany, the same grade to his wife, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, also scoring an A.
Yes. Yeah. So Catherine has had it's been so nice to have Catherine back. It's so good to see her doing well. And it's, was a big concern last year what would happen. And she is doing, again, so incredibly well. It's so incredibly nice to see her doing engagements, seeming to be in good spirits, healthy. And obviously, it is, somewhat the challenge of Catherine at this point is that we know she had major abdominal surgery, which I would imagine has impact on her day-to-day life in a way that we don't understand. But when it comes to, obviously, her treatment ended last year in September. And so we're still told sometimes, or at least I hear that, oh, she's still recovering. It's going to take her a while to get to these points. And while I think that's definitely true, I do look forward to more engagements next year. I think that's sort of the next step is trying to get out a little bit more. And again, a tour like of Australia would be fantastic for the family with the kids. I think that would be incredible, because Louis has never been abroad on a royal tour. And so I'm really anxious and hopeful that we will see that from their family there next year, that Catherine will feel well enough. But it's so good to have her back, so good to have her seemingly doing a lot better. And I look forward to her continuing to make strides next year as well.
But Brittany, receiving your most positive rating on your brutally honest royal report cards of 2025 with a perfect A, not even A plus, A plus plus is Princess Anne. So Brittany, your favorite royal of 2025, why?
Anne is just such a hardworking royal. And what I love about what Anne does is she does it with no fuss, no muss. And she does those bread and butter royal engagements so incredibly well, which is such an asset to the monarchy. What she does, I think, is almost irreplaceable. I think she's actually, I think, one of the most impactful members of the monarchy, because there was this survey that came out a couple of years ago talking about how it's not sort of the big things that kind of connect people to the monarchy. It's those little bread and butter royal engagements where a royal goes to a farm, they go to a factory, they go to this small town. Those are the ones that have the most impact in the long run. And Anne does those all the time. She does a fantastic job at them. She's the hardest working member of the British royal family. And whenever she retires, I know she has a retirement age, I think of maybe it's even 90, it'll be so sad to see her leave that role. And the British royal family, they need another Princess Anne as a replacement, because I think she is perhaps one of the most important cogs in the royal machine at this point, and they need another Anne, somebody who's just dedicated to the work, goes a couple of times a week to engagements, goes to small communities, asks great questions. Anne is just such a huge asset to the monarchy. And without her, I don't know where they would be, to be honest. I don't know where they would be. So we definitely need more Princess Anne for sure.
Brilliant report cards, Brittany. I have loved all of your reporting for us here on Outspoken throughout 2025. Of course, make sure you subscribe to the Royal News Network on YouTube for Brittany's coverage of royal families across the globe. But Brittany, you will be back next Monday with all of the news on the royal family here on Outspoken. As ever, have a wonderful new year, and thank you so much for everything in 2025. And of course, if you do want first access to our Royal Uncancelled after show here on Outspoken, we are back live.
Sarah Ferguson, hypocrisy without principle. This is where moral outrage peaks. Ferg's downfall isn't about mistakes, it's about lying while begging. Financial desperation. Epstein emails. Public virtue, private dependency. The unforgivable sin highlighted here. There was no loyalty, no morality, only money. That hypocrisy corrodes trust far more than scandal alone. King Charles, the reactive king. AC+ for the king is a serious indictment. Charles isn't condemned for cruelty, he's criticized for hesitation. The monarchy under Charles is portrayed as reactive, not strategic. Delayed, not decisive. Protecting family over institution. The message is blunt. If Charles doesn't deal with Harry decisively, Harry will deal with the monarchy brutally. This segment raises existential stakes. The monarchy's survival is not guaranteed. Edward and Camilla, competent but underpowered. Edward is shown as dependable, scandal-free, invisibly useful. Camilla is framed as serious, compassionate, lacking symbolic power. The criticism here isn't failure, it's missed opportunity. William and Catherine, stability restored. This is the future-facing section. William and Catherine are praised for quiet leadership, resilience, institutional seriousness. Catherine's return is positioned as symbolic reassurance, proof the monarchy can endure crisis. Princess and the gold standard, and emerges as the moral spine of the monarchy. No drama, no branding, no whining, just work. The warning is stark. When and goes, the monarchy loses its engine. This report card isn't gossip, it's a stress test. It reveals who strengthens the institution, who exploits it, and who threatens its future. Now it's your turn. Who really deserves an F grade in the royal family? Should Harry and Meghan lose their titles permanently? Is King Charles too weak or too cautious? Comment your verdict. Like if you agree with these report cards, subscribe for uncensored royal commentary. The monarchy survives on trust, and trust must be earned.